Okay,
We're
you're
good.
recording now. Got it.
Yes. Okay.
So good evening. Thank you for inviting us over for the presentation. Again, my name is Bruce Treadway. I'm a volunteer at the National Museum of the American Sailor. For most of the last few years, I've volunteered in the collections department. That's largely because professionally, I'm an appraiser of antiques and collectibles. So it made sense for me to spend time inspecting, documenting, and describing the items donated to the museum. But at the end of 2023, I was asked if I'd be interested in moving over to the education department and giving these presentations. I think it was largely because I could identify every object that came in through the door in terms of donations. And in the late 1980s, early 1990s, I was known as QM to SW Bruce Treadway. That is an E5 on a navigation team. It's the Marine Corps equivalent is sergeant for that rank. I was part of the navigation team on an amphibious warship. I do get asked, why do you do this? So why do I volunteer to give these presentations? And the answer is simple. I've done well. After the Navy, I went to college, then graduate school. Fast forward a couple of decades, I started a company, and this past September, a few months ago, I sold that company that I started. At 57, I'm in a position to retire. I won't. I will tell you with absolute certainty that a careful examination of my life will show that the foundation for anything I've accomplished, knowledge, skills, abilities, came from my service in the United States Navy. I am grateful for the opportunity to get back. The National Museum of the American Sailor is an official department of the Navy Museum under the Naval History and Heritage Command. The museum's located at Great Lakes Naval Base, home of the Navy's only food camp. It is just north of Lake Bluff. So the museum's mission is to preserve and share the stories of the Navy's enlisted sailors. Officially, it was founded in 1991, and in 2014, it was given its current name. All enlisted sailors begin their Navy careers at Naval Station Great Lakes. So I think last year we graduated 42,000 recruits. That is over 800 per week. That's a lot of sailors that we bring in the Navy every week, every year. As an aside, in 1987, I had the great pleasure of going through boot camp in July, August, and September in Orlando, Florida. Pretty warm down there. So the guys don't know how lucky they are, how good they've got it up here. You're looking at the slide in front of you. We are open to the public. The hours, I believe, are 9 o'clock a.m. to 5 p.m. Weekdays, and about the same on Saturday, and it is free. I'll talk a little bit more about that. We have some terrific collections. We hold, it's well over 2,000 three-dimensional objects at this point, and over 30,000 photographs, and that includes a lot of antique maps, interesting things. So if you're able to make it over, we'd love to see you. And we have a considerable staff. Sorry, that was me, wasn't it? We have a considerable staff, devoted professionals, along with quite a few volunteers. So today, we are going to, well, first, are there any questions? I promised I would take questions in between slides.
So far,
Okay.
so good.
Okay. So for today, can you imagine being deployed on a ship, or as you can see behind me, a submarine, that is a Seawolf class. It houses about 142 ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. It is our last line of defense. No one knows where the ICBM submarines, affectionately referred to as boomers. No one actually knows where they are. I shouldn't say no one. There's There's a handful of people in the Pentagon who know where they are, but no one knows exactly who those people are. So can you imagine being deployed on a ship or a sub at sea for months at a time without the ability to just pop over to your local grocery store for the essentials? Most people can't unless you've been there. But since the beginning of the Navy, our sailors have been making do, planning ahead, going without when necessary, and leaning on new innovations to make their diets more palatable, more nutritious. Today, we'll discover the ins and outs of Navy chow, from the age of sail with its salt pork and scurvy, to the advantages of canning and refrigeration. We'll also take a look at the men and women responsible for feeding us, feeding these massive crews, and we'll take a look at a couple of die-hard sailor recipes. Okay, food in the age of sail. When Congress first established the Navy in 1775, the food sailors ate, the way they prepared it, and the way they stored it was very different from today. In the late 1700s, early 1800s, there was no canning, no refrigeration. Those technologies did not exist. For meat, ships either had to carry live animals or packaged meat in barrels with significant amounts of salt as a preservative. Sailors had to make do with staples aboard the ship, and food could be one of the most contentious issues aboard Navy vessels. In fact, sailors could turn mutinous in the event the Navy cut rations or served bad quality food. However, I will tell you that was always a concern. It never happened. There actually has never been an instance where mutiny occurred on a U.S. Navy ship. Other countries' navies, yes, never ours. Starvation was a prevalent and very realistic worry for early sailors. Stories of ghost ships and cannibalistic crews were common in sailor lore. Referencing, I won't mention any other countries, especially with everything going on in the world, yeah, not the U.S. Navy. The Navy did its best to ensure that all vessels were well stocked for extended voyages. To give you some perspective, when the USS Constitution set sail for a 6-month cruise in 1813, I believe she carried, and you can see the list there. It's a lot of bread, it's a lot of beef, a lot of pork, and just imagine that all of the beef and pork was actually salted in barrels. You can see everything else, and yes, the last item, 10,000 pounds of spirits. I'm not making that up. This may have been a simple diet by today's standards, but it was hearty and it met most of the basic nutritional demands of incredibly physically active sailors. That high ration of spirits may seem crazy today, but the age of sail, sailors enjoyed a spirit ration every day, like many early U.S. Navy traditions. The rum ration was borrowed from the British. British sailors had been issued a rum ration since the 1730s. So why a liquor ration at all? Most people assume sailors were issued rum due to a lack of safe drinking water. That's not the case. That's actually one of the first problems that we solved before ships were deploying. There was, safe, clean drinking water was always available, plentiful. But as one British naval historian put it, it was for morale purposes. It was their only solace. They drank it when they were thirsty. They drank it when they were hungry. They drank it when they were afraid. They drank it to celebrate victory. They drank it to burn defeat. They drank it to mask the stench of the mess decks. So multiple purposes there. At some point, liquor was more or less restricted from the ships. I'll just tell you that when I was in, only commissioned officers could have liquor aboard the ship, and each bottle had to be reported to the executive officer, second in command. they were not allowed to consume it while aboard the ship. So there's absolutely no consumption of alcohol aboard the ship.
Wow.
Yes,
Can I bug you, Bruce? Okay, I have two things. Is it possible to make the slide bigger to fill the space a little bit? It's a little small for some people, they were saying. So I don't know if it can be expanded a bit.
how's that?
There we go. Okay, I think that yeah, that's definitely bigger. Okay, we also have a question. Okay, let me get to that. The it was under Q&A. Here we go. It says, how many crew members on the U.S. Constitution in 1813? So that's kind of an interesting ratio when you think of how much food and spirits to how many people were on that boat. Do you have any idea just off the top of your head?
I believe it was 460.
Wow. And how long were they, would you say, typically out to?
So that initially was, they anticipated it being 6 months. But understand it was expected to be a 6 month deployment. They didn't expect to be at sea for 6 months. They did have the ability to fish and they had the ability to hunt. And they fully expected that if they were gone for, extended periods of time, they would be pulling in somewhere to get more food. And of course, they always had money. Honestly, usually gold or silver, so that it would be universally accepted. And the captain and the purser is what we would call a dispersing officer, the guy who handles the money on the ship. They're the ones who would have the safe and access to cash.
Excellent. Okay, very cool.
Mhm.
Good to know.
Cool. Let's see. After the American Revolution, it was decided that rum was too British in tradition, so the Americans switched to a whiskey ration. And they abandoned that entirely in the Civil War. But so all of this time, though, I will tell you, water was still the primary and most essential drink of sailors. Okay, that lovely photo. Scurvy was real. You may have heard of it. As you can imagine, nutrition aboard ship in the earliest years of the Navy was less than ideal. The lack of fresh food did make it difficult for sailors to stay healthy. Perhaps the most notorious lack of nutrition was scurvy. Scurvy is caused by a lack of vitamin C. That probably sounds inconsequential to us today, where we can pop over to the drugstore and grab some vitamins, but for the sailors in the age of sail, this scurvy was deadly, could be deadly. Between the age of Columbus and the invention of steam engines, scurvy killed more than 2 million sailors.
Wow.
Not a joke. So that is between Europe and America.
Whoa.
Between the age of Columbus, I'm sorry, by the mid 1700s, by the mid 1700s, scurvy was so prominent that a 50% death rate for any long ocean voyage was assumed. Yes.
Incredible.
Yeah. Scurvy was responsible for more deaths than storms, shipwrecks, combat, and all other diseases combined. So now you have your primer on the significance of scurvy in the early Navy.
Oh
Um,
my gosh. I have an actual question of my own. And you may be saying in this in the next slide. When I lived on the West Coast, there's a lot of ice. They called them ice flowers. Are you familiar with this? They said that there were these flowers that could suck vitamin C out of, and then when they got to land, they would just throw these flowers overboard or whatever, and then that's what like it's an invasive species. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know.
Okay, so all right, well, that that's what I was told because the whole coastline, like up in San Francisco in that area, has these flowers that are just like, and they said apparently, and maybe it's a legend, but I was just curious. But scurvy was serious.
Yep, yep. It was deadly, but it was also a terrible way to go. In the early stages, scurvy is hard to spot. Initial symptoms ailments that might plague any sailor on the seas, like a loss of appetite and loss of weight, fatigue, irritability, and lethargy. Well, what do those symptoms tell you? If unnoticed and left untreated, it progresses to anemia, bone pain, swelling, blood blisters, um, corkscrew hairs, gum disease, and loss of teeth, open wounds, shortness of breath, depression. It gets worse. Eventually, scurvy will produce swelling, severe jaundice, destruction of red blood cells, sudden and spontaneous bleeding, neuropathy, weakness and numbing in both the hands and the feet, fever and convulsions. Eventually, it can lead to the total breakdown of the body, blackening of the gums, re-breaking of old bones, lack of collagen production, and the disappearance of cartilage, cardiovascular damage, seizures, or aneurysms. So scurvy's nasty. Fortunately, Navy surgeons in both England and the US made great strides toward understanding and treating scurvy in the mid to late 1700s. English physician Dr. James Lind, I believe, was the first to publish major works on treating scurvy. He found that lemon juice successfully cured it. Unfortunately, it took 42 years before the Royal Navy instituted Lind's recommendations to carry lemon aboard all Navy vessels. In the United States Navy, Navy surgeon William Barton experimented with different treatments of fruits, especially lemons, on several ships. And in 1814, he published his findings, but like his predecessors, Barton made similar discoveries about the power of citrus fruits, and his advice was not taken seriously by the U.S. Navy immediately. Scurvy continued to pop up in the fleet, both fleets throughout the next century. They lasted until 1933 when Charles King and Albert Zent identified vitamin C in fruits. And soon after, the chemists Norman Haworth and Thaddeus Reichstein were able to successfully manufacture vitamin C, that was given to sailors, almost eradicating scurvy altogether. Any questions yet? We already covered the scurvy questions.
I'm guessing it's just because they couldn't get anything fresh. There were no fresh fruits and vegetables because they wouldn't last. So as opposed to the army who could get something on the ground. Basically.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So let's see, Navy cooks, among my most favorite people on the ship. I mean that sincerely. With food such an important part of a sailor's life, it makes sense that Navy cooks have always been a favorite rate or job. Cooks have served from the very beginning and were often revered by the crew. Historically, Chief Jacob Wasby, a cook aboard the continental ship Alfred, was the first person ever referred to as chief. And at that time, it was an honorary term for his important role, and that was in 1776. Just so in case you don't know, a chief in the Navy is a special, it's a special position. It is a rank. It's an E7. The Marine Corps equivalent is gunnery sergeant. So a Navy chief is not just a technical expert, but also typically is the senior enlisted person in a division with, anywhere from, half a dozen enlisted personnel under him to 40 or 50 or more. It can be more, particularly in the engineering or deck departments. I think it can easily be more than 40 or 50. So it's a significant role. And he was the first. Cooks were one of the very first Navy rates. That name was changed to ship's cook in 1838, but their role remained the same. We will talk a little bit about the evolution there. They were are still responsible for the safe storage, preparation, and serving of meals. When considering how large the crews of Navy vessels are, it's a daunting task. Although the age of sail vessels were much smaller than today's floating vessels, early Navy ships carried crews of 400 to 500 typically, with the largest vessels carrying 600 to 650. So I think that helps answer your question earlier about how many people were on the ship. I'm sure it was between 6 and 650.
Wow.
You have to keep in mind that, it's not a 9 to 5 job working on a ship. Sailors work around the clock 24/7, which means they don't follow a traditional eating schedule of breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Cooks introduced a fourth meal in 1902 known as midnight rations. It is served around midnight to sailors who are working through the night. So typically it's available to those who stood watch up until or worked up until 11:45 p.m. and then were heading off to bed, or those who had been sleeping and they got up at typically around 11 p.m. Because they were going on watch at 11:45 p.m. and were going to be standing watch or working during the night. The evolution of the Navy from sailing vessels powered by wind to steam vessels powered by coal at the turn of the 20th century created a greater need for this fourth meal. Those machines required attendance, so you had more sailors working around the clock to keep the boilers fed. To feed the late night sailors, cooks got creative, often using leftovers from the day's meals to create the additional fare. Mid-rats is still an integral part of a ship's schedule. Any questions?
So far, so good. We're right with you.
Okay. We take canning for granted today, but when canned foods were first invented in the early 1800s, it was a big deal. Where once sailors stored foods were plagued by weevils and maggots, I'm not making that up. Canned goods ensured food remained fresh for far longer. A Frenchman, Nicolas Appert, was the first to seal food. Of course, he used airtight champagne bottles. They were readily available. This was in 1803. His creation was then utilized by the French Navy, who quickly appreciated the improvement over barrel-stored foodstuffs. A few years after Appert's champagne invention, an Englishman named Peter Durand improved upon it by sealing food in tin cans. And in 1861, when Americans began fighting each other during the Civil War, the U.S. Had caught on to the benefits of canning, and the U.S. military disseminated canned rations to soldiers and sailors alike. Canning saw its biggest boom during World War II. Not only did the U.S. military have more mouths to feed than ever before, but it also had the advantage of canned foods from a variety of companies. Civilian companies catered to the troops during the war, creating canned foods that could be sent aboard ships or delivered to advancing troops. The childhood favorite Chef Boyardee actually won a contract with the military to supply troops with canned servings of spaghetti and meatballs in 1942. But the most famous canned food of World War II was none other than Spam. Initially created in 1937 by Hormel, Spam was already popular among Americans before World War II, but sales really took off during the war. Over 150 million pounds of Spam were sold to the military, making Spam a regular part of a soldier's and sailor's diets. If you're ever in Germany and you're interested, there is a Spam museum. My wife is from northern Wisconsin. She is German. She has been there twice. Apparently, there was that much to see, and she still likes Spam. I was a navigator in the Navy. My wife was a finance officer in the Army.
Wow.
She was a career. She said that was her career. She actually lived in Germany where she was stationed for a couple of years. So I know that's the first trip she made there. And the second time she dragged me. So anyway, any questions about canning?
That's amazing. I just have to say that poster is really cool. That
Hmm.
is there's stuff like that at the museum. Is that you
Oh
guys?
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, hmm,
Oh, look.
absolutely.
Okay, looks like a question came in. Oh, oh, I already got it. Never mind, we answered it. Okay,
Okay.
we're good. So,
Next major invention, refrigeration. Perhaps the most significant innovation to Navy food was the invention of refrigeration. Although people were tinkering with ideas for refrigeration as early as the 1700s, the refrigeration we know and love was not invented until the 1800s, when several innovators developed mechanical processes for commercial refrigeration. It all came together in 1913 when I think Fred Wolf was the American inventor, created the first home electric refrigerator. Meanwhile, innovators in ship design were also experimenting with methods of refrigeration during the 1800s. The first attempt to ship refrigerated meat across the Pacific was when Australian merchant ship Northam sailed from Australia to England in 1876. It was not a success. The refrigeration machinery broke down en route and the cargo spoiled. 3 years later, the Australians um, were successful and other nations began taking notice. So they figured out what happened and they fixed it. By World War II, the U.S. Recognized the significance of refrigeration for all branches of the military. Not only were refrigeration units added to the Navy vessels, but actually whole ships were created simply for transporting perishable goods, both to resupply Navy ships and carry provisions to soldiers stationed around the world. So we actually had replenishment ships that did nothing else. Today we have replenishment ships. We have two types actually. One, they're called oilers, and they just carry really large volumes of fuel. So they facilitate underway replenishment, where the ship. I'm not making this up. I promise. I did it many times. The ships are at sea. There's a ship that needs fuel, and there's the underway replenishment ship, and they're traveling along, typically somewhere between 8 and 12 knots, 10 to 14 miles per hour. Hopefully, the seas are calm. And they throw ropes across to one another, and they tie one end of the rope to a hose, a fuel hose, and they pass it across. And so they're staying pretty tight together, right? Typically, within 100 feet, which is close when you're talking about ships that are 700 to 1,200 feet long. Um, and the hoses are connected, and you refuel the ship. That is what you're doing. You're replenishing the fuel. Now, it's not just diesel, it's JP5, which is jet fuel, or anything else, any other fluids that need to be transported that way. We do that today. Like right now, it's happening somewhere in the world. These ships they were there for replenishing food. So they were refrigeration ships. So you can imagine them pulling food out of refrigerated units in the ship, putting it onto pallets, and then getting it over to the ship, adjacent to them. Typically pulling alongside. Ideally, there was a port, and they could pull into the port and just carry stuff down and onto the next ship. But they had to get creative sometimes. I'm sure that was exciting. Glad I wasn't there. These were called reefer ships, and during World War I, the Navy contracted for 18 reefer ships, so 18 of these ships stocked full of food. A couple of decades later, in World War II, the Navy again called for more reefer ships to supply the troops, but enemy submarines quickly caught on to their importance and made them a favorite target. Despite threats from submarines, the Navy relied on over 40 reefer ships during the war.
that was my question, if you don't mind, Bruce.
Sure.
Submarines. What in the world? How did those guys eat?
So be, prior to the advent of the nuclear submarine, so the USS Nautilus, I think in 1943, um, submarines were diesel powered and they could only stay underwater for so long. They had to come up to the surface um, to cycle out the air, get in fresh oxygen, and they just they couldn't deploy for as long a period of time. Um, and they didn't have the technology that we have today. So normally, they would surface or they would at least. So okay, you don't know this. There's a 40-foot wire, so you can, let's say you're on a submarine. Um, there was a, I say it's a 40-foot wire. It's actually more like a 40-foot rod that they could put up. So they'd be about 40 feet under the surface. But they'd send this rod up through the same tube as the periscope. And then a shortwave radio wire would be dragged out hundreds of feet behind the submarine, and they would telegraph um, um, their identity, a classified version of it. And in theory, they knew where the supply ships were going to be, so they would be close to one. The supply ship would pick up the transmission, reply back, get more exact coordinates, give them their exact coordinates. The submarine would then rendezvous with that ship, pull alongside. Actually, easier to do with the submarine because they would literally just tie up alongside. They keep their engines going and just travel at the same course and speed as the surface ship, um, and get replenished that way.
So fascinating. This is great. So much more. I mean, so many facets to this. Yeah.
Yeah. So that actually did that. The next section of this slide presentation is supplying food to ships and submarines deployed. It's a well-coordinated logistical operation. Just, an overview. I think I've just walked through all of this. There's the initial stocking. They're fully stocked with provisions before leaving port. And Navy supply officers use detailed planning to calculate the amount and types of food required for the duration. Submarines, due to space constraints, as you can imagine, prioritize non-perishable foods like canned goods, freeze-dried items, vacuum-packed products, and so forth. Replenishment at sea. There are two ways to do underway replenishment I just mentioned. One is connected, and the other is today we have vertical replenishment. Helicopters, that's what we had. Helicopters transporting supplies in slings, loads, or cargo nets from this supply ship to the deck of the receiving vessel. We got shipments, that's what we call them. We got shipments of fresh fruits and vegetables at least once a week on our ship. On the helo deck, we had a helicopter landing pad on the back deck of the ship. And we would have not pallets, but large cargo boxes delivered. And it was typically on a Sunday afternoon. Much easier for us to do. I've already described what submarines had to do. For longer durations at sea, foods are often processed for longer shelf lives, like freeze-dried meats, some canned goods, vacuum-sealed meats. Modern refrigeration and freezing systems on ships and subs allow for a mix of perishable and non-perishable goods, the same way the refrigerator at home has a freezer section and a refrigerator section. It's very similar. A much larger scale, though, if you can imagine. Fresh fruits and vegetables were consumed early in the deployment, and the preserved and frozen items were used for labor. And I just mentioned as we've moved along, this was in the 80s and early 90s. We actually got replenished all the time. There were emergency supplies, emergency rations to ensure that the crew could sustain themselves if resupply was delayed or disrupted. These were, you've probably heard of meals ready to eat, MREs. The Marines, so I was on an amphibious warfare ship. We had 250 sailors, 350 Marines. So you'll hear me comment about, Marine life as well, because it was part of it. The MREs are all, they call them battle rations. So it's what they have in their rucksacks that they carry out to the field. High energy ration packs, and compact, long lasting food bars. The logistical system ensures that the Navy crews are well fed even during prolonged deployments or in remote areas. It's a testament to both technology and precise planning. I went on multiple 2 to 3 month deployments. Our longest deployment was 7 months. That was Operation Desert Storm. Food supply was never even a question. Like, I mean, these guys, they have it down. They have it down. They have it nailed. It was not, never came up. There were never any issues. It's like they have a backup plan for the backup plan. I never, and I was a navigator. I worked on the bridge. If there had ever been any issues, I would have heard about it. Nope, nothing. So they got this nailed. Okay, full bellies, full homes. So the innovations of food preservation methods allowed the Navy to provide more nutritious meals, but throughout the Navy's history, the biggest benefit of Navy food has been its impact on sailors' morale. I mentioned earlier, sailors have strong feelings about their meals. A poor meal or limited rations can turn even the most laid-back sailor into a hangry monster. A good meal has the power to turn the tide aboard ship. A lot of times we were away from home during the holidays. A deployment that can cause severe feelings of homesickness. In an effort to combat that homesickness, Navy cooks have long provided elaborate holiday feasts for sailors at shore ports and in the fleet. There were 4 consecutive Christmases that I was deployed, 3 consecutive Easters, and lots of major holidays that we were at sea, and there were lots of us, lots of guys on the ship, where it was just very common that you weren't home for the holidays, and that was that. But our cooks were amazing; they were awesome. So we never felt like we were deprived of anything. Particularly a lot of us who came from relatively humble economic beginnings, we were actually even better on the ship than we would have if we were back home. So really, I love the cooks on our ship. They made a lot of traditional dishes, and they would make ethnically consistent dishes for certain holidays. So, and they would just have a member of the crew who, for example, I remember that, I can't remember which day it was, but they wanted to put together a setter. No one knew how kosher meals worked. So unfortunately, we had like 12.5 guys on the ship who were happy to help. They were happy to explain things. So that's it was good. I love the cooks on our ship.
Bruce, we have a question,
Sure.
a comment question. So this is from George, and he says, in 30 years after Vietnam Navy underway, went from balanced diet to a resemblance of Taco Bell, Kentucky Fried, and McDonald's. How and why did this happen? Has it evolved into be more like of what we're used to?
So I will tell you that that was long after I got out. Okay. I have heard that. I do have family members, nieces and nephews who've gone into the Navy, and I have heard that on shore bases, because all of that work, not all of it, but a lot of it has been subcontracted out to civilian organizations, including the management of eating facilities on base. A lot, or at least much of it, yeah, there has there has been a resemblance to the food court in the mall. That's what Derek Hire, one of my nephews, he's a Navy nuke, and he spent several years at school on shore bases before he deployed, and he would make that comment. I actually never experienced that, but I do understand. It's my understanding that when you get on a ship or a submarine, yeah, that goes away. Uh, you're eating healthy. You know, the McDonald's model, no, that goes away. There is not enough space to accommodate, you know, fast food. Everything is about calorie density, nutrition, and within those parameters, as I'll talk about in a little bit later, they've come a long way. The Navy's come a long way in terms of training its cooks and getting them highly specialized to prepare nutritious meals, which is absolutely a priority.
First,
Uh,
since I've already kind of got you interrupted, I have a personal question. My dad was in the Navy,
mhm,
and he served in the 60s.
mhm.
And when I talked about doing this presentation, I just remember him saying that, he peeled a lot of potatoes. And so actually, I don't know if anybody can, oh, you can't see this because anyway, but the flyer that I had for this program shows a bunch of guys, I'm thinking this is World War II, sitting around barrels of potatoes. So just a question, did you peel potatoes?
So never,
Never. Okay, my
never.
dad peeled potatoes.
Okay. So this is something like this has come up before. The Marines will tell you, I suspect it's the same or similar for the Army. Um, it is it is a pain for the cooks to have to peel potatoes. So if someone is out of line, even if his uniform is just not quite right, um, any excuse to assign them to peeling spuds is taken. And it isn't, and it's not really a punishment. It has, it's a job. It has to be done in
Hmm.
order for everybody to eat. It has to be done. Um, and that's that. So, on the Navy side, though, I never heard of anyone being assigned to that responsibility. So I don't know if we had something automated to make it faster because I'll tell you, we've all seen the vintage apple peelers,
That's
corers,
hmm
right? I'm assuming we had something like that. I don't know that for certain. But no, on our ship, that was never a job.
Bruce, I'm telling you, we're blowing up with questions now. And I also just want to say, I can't believe you just said spuds because that's what my dad always says. And now I'm going to be like, hey, Dad, did you get in trouble? Is this why you were peeling potatoes?
Uh-oh,
Uh-oh.
uh-oh. Yep.
Okay. We have another common question. So George said, I was on a carrier for a few days 20 years ago, and it was French fries and fried chicken. Said the doctor, we will have many heart attacks among 25-year-olds. You're right, though, morale rules. And then I believe we have shoot, I think I had another question. Oh, are there any okay, this is from Steven. Steven says, are sailors given any choices at meals for their meal? Like, do you have to eat like what's on the menu that day, or is there a choice? You kind of mentioned a food
No,
court sort of thing, but
no, I think in practically on every ship you have some choices. You
mhm.
have choices. And I'll give you an example. On our ship, and again, ships in the 80s and 90s. Um, so first there's the hot meal line. And then there's the salad bar. So the hot meal line, um, typically, it's going to be beef or chicken. And sometimes there may be seafood. Yeah, seafood, tuna fish counts as seafood. I'm just telling you. Oh, okay. So there's at least two options, sometimes three, and then hot vegetables, a couple of starches, potatoes, rice, something. Um, you don't get nobody gets everything because they give you pretty decent portion sizes of each thing. And but then you get to the salad bar line or the salad bar. We always had a 21 item salad bar, and we were on a smaller ship. There was nothing luxurious about being on an amphibious warfare ship. We were on a ship that beached and delivered Marines. And just before doing that, we provided shore bombardment. You can figure out what that means. This was absolutely a combat ship. There was no frills, there was nothing extra, nothing special. We did have guys who came from carriers and larger ships who would make comments about how, they had more or whatever on those ships. Yeah, okay, I understand. Feel free to go back anytime. The reality is we tended to get promoted faster. Um,
Okay.
Notably faster because of that.
Bruce, one more question. One of our panelists or attendees is saying that they can hear me okay, but there's a little bit of an echo on your end. So he's just wondering if, I don't know if there's anything you can tweak on your end. Just a bit of an echo, maybe. Not
Okay,
sure.
do you hear an echo at all?
I'm okay. Yeah.
I'm gonna take a look
Okay.
at my Zoom settings to see. I won't spend a whole lot of time.
We're kind of like about 10 minutes left in the presentation, so
Right.
sorry about that, y'all. Hopefully you can, but we'll see if we can tweak it before the end here.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything
Okay.
in the settings. I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, it's just volume, it looks like, that I can control.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. So,
so let's see. Let's move on to a couple of favorite Navy recipes. Um, A favorite artifact among Navy historians are the Navy cookbooks detailing impressive recipes for hundreds of sailors. Um, we'll take a look at a few of them in more than 100 years of history contained in those books. There are some recipes that stand out as unique or special to the U.S. Navy. And if you go to the Great Lakes Naval Base to the Naval Museum, you will see we have a few. So it's interesting. It makes me appreciate what I have. I'll tell you that. So Navy biscuits, also known as hardtack, Tack. Um, Honestly, it's described as it's as travel-friendly bread, and it's described or referred to as a Navy biscuit. I am telling you, it is as hard as a hockey puck. Okay, you are listening to a former goalie. My son played goaltender for a travel hockey team in Chicago for 11 years, and and so he and I practice, 4, 5, 6 days a week for the regular season, the spring season, and the summer skate for 11 years. So I'm telling you these things because they're so out there. Yeah, you don't, you don't, you don't bite into them. I better say that before I go to the next slide. You don't bite into them because you'll break a tooth. You actually soak it in water. Now, way back in the day, the guys would soak it in whiskey. I imagine that made it a whole lot more palatable, but we didn't have that when I was in. So yeah, you could soak it in whiskey, and then you just really all I ever did was gain an appreciation for what the cooks were preparing for us. That's
oh my gosh. I'm
yeah.
telling you, Bruce, people are into this. Okay, a question and a comment. So here's the first comment. This presentation has been very informative. Thanks for organizing. Good pictures. I agree. Tell Bruce all the time. I love his pictures. They're so good. Okay, and then the question was, do the sailors go through like with a punch card, or something, or do they just go in a line? Is there any like keeping track of how much each person? You know what I mean? Like,
No,
no, okay,
just going in a line.
okay,
Yeah, a lot of us would. I mean, we'd be pressed for time. We were either just getting off a watch. I was navigating. I was on the bridge between 8 and 12 hours a day minimum. Um, we were pressed for time. I either had to get up to the bridge, so I didn't have a whole lot of time for anything superfluous, or I was exhausted. I've been up there working, supervising, underway replenishment, whatever. For those of you who are familiar, I stood watch as conning officer when we were underway, um, depending upon what was going on. So uh, I was, we're tired. The guys in the engine room, uh, they were tired. It's hot down there. The guys on the deck operations, that's a lot of physical labor. Um, they're tired. So No, no punch cards. We would just go through. Um, yeah,
Yeah, so food is a serious business. This
it
is,
is.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, so SOS. Okay.
I've heard about this from my dad too.
Yeah. Okay. So you know what it stands for.
Uh-huh.
Um, so yeah, I think if you look on the slide,
Uh-huh.
you
Very
can
good.
yeah, you can see what it stands for. Um, it is still served today. There are people who like the combination of dried beef, milk, fat, flour, pepper, and a slice of toast. Um, it's it's still out there. So yeah, um, it was never anything I was interested in. Um,
Not your cup of tea.
no,
Yeah.
no. Salisbury steak, on the other hand, I thought was amazing. Although it never quite looked like that. Um, but yeah, Salisbury steak remained in Navy cookbooks for years. Um, it's unique, you know, on every ship because there's so many things you can do um, to season it, to you know modify the recipe. And I happen to be on a ship where a lot of people like spicy foods, so yeah, it tended to be kicked up a notch, as Emeril Lagasse would say. Um, and you knew that up front. Um, I think it was created by a Dr. Salisbury, actually. He was an early inventor of fad diets. Yeah, go figure, right? It was meant
Yeah.
to be a low carb weight loss dish. That didn't work out. Um, Salisbury believed that fruits and vegetables were poisonous substances that caused everything from heart disease to tuberculosis. I did say Dr. Salisbury, right? I mean, he was probably one of those guys who said that, you know, you should smoke occasional cigarettes to clear out your lungs. Um, Not making that up. His solution was Salisbury steak, ground beef, primarily composed of lean beef, seasoned with onions, broiled and covered in gravy. Um, he was so convinced that the dish was healthy, he recommended people eat it 3 times a day.
This is
Um,
great.
yeah, so all kinds of adjustments and modifications, revisions were made to his recipe, and adding more seasonings. I think I mentioned that, as well as adding breadcrumbs and then frying it in fat instead of broiling it, which just makes me think of some of the county fairs I've gone to, and I've seen things like deep fried Twinkies, because what else are you going to do with it, right? How can we take that up one level or down, depending on your perspective?
Mhm.
Um, Today, there is a focus on nutrition. By the 20th century, innovations like refrigeration allowed the Navy to focus more heavily on sailor nutrition as opposed to simply keeping sailors fed. Um, the study of nutrition really got its start after World War One, and military minds have been at the forefront since the beginning. Um, there is an American Institute of Nutrition that was founded in 1928 by a Army nutrition officer. Yes, that was a job, Army nutrition officer, way back in the day, like a century ago. The League of Nations also called for research on nutrition during the interwar period. That's what they call peacetime, interwar period, between the wars, because they knew something was coming, right? Um, and that was the first report suggesting that the importance of leafy greens, fruit, and milk in a diet. And in 1959, the Navy founded its own research center, the Naval Health Research Center, whose mission was to do exactly what I just described.
Okay.
Today, we have culinary specialists. The Navy cook rating has gone through several changes through the 20th century. It has led into a variety of food-related ratings and then consolidated into the rate of commissary men. In 1975, the name was changed to Mess Management Specialist, which is what they were called when I was in. More recently, 2004, that name was changed to Culinary Specialists, and there are now multiple specialties within that. So to become a qualified culinary specialist, you have to go to a 5-week school after you complete boot camp. And that initial school is in Fort Lee, Virginia. And that's the basic course. There are a lot of specialty courses for bakers, for meat preparation, for actual cooking. The basic course actually just prepares you to assist and working in the galley kitchen, if you will. Unlike their predecessors who may have cooked for 300 to 400 sailors at a time, today's culinary specialists are responsible for up to 5,000 sailors. 6,000 if there's an air wing attached. So 5,000 sailors is an aircraft carrier, but if there's a full air wing, you can add another 1,000 people to that. It's a significant undertaking and one that is absolutely essential to the daily lives and morale of U.S. Navy sailors.
Incredible. Oh my goodness.
So if you can't find us in person, please follow us online. We are in the usual places. And I'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of your evening to join us.
Bruce, you're incredible. It's 7:30 on the dot. You're
Yes,
you
hurrah.
you stuck the landing. Excellent. Yeah, thanks to everybody who attended tonight. This was recorded, so it will be up if you guys want to watch it again or tell your friends, if they missed it, that they can see it. So it'll be on our YouTube channel. Also, there should be a survey. So definitely, if you guys have comments or questions for Bruce, I can pass those along to him. And if you want to hear anything else, I've just loved working with you guys, Bruce. Thank you so much for what you do, volunteering
Sure
your
thing.
time to enlighten all of us. This has been, as always, it's always a great presentation. So I didn't see any other questions, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. But like I said, again, look for that email from us with the link to the recording, and be sure to leave some comments in our survey. So thank you, Bruce.
Sure thing. Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks
Bye-bye.
everybody. All right, bye-bye.